Welcome back to another episode of Searching for Mcguffin with your hosts,
George,
Gabe.
And Leigh.
I feel like there's something missing.
Yes.
No.
Two of our what? No, no.
You're right now.
No.
I don't know what I was thinking.
All right.
It was like a whisper. I don't know.
Okay, so we're not gonna go with
Anyway.
that bit about them being lost in the forest.
Oh, Dan. Dan is somewhere out
Oh,
there.
Okay.
That's the person I haven't seen, but I just felt like something else was missing when I was,
Yeah. Yeah. You can't describe
Call
what
attention
you
to
were
it.
doing
I can't
on
verbally say it.
camera. Hey, Leigh.
Hey.
How you doing, girl?
I'm
that was
good.
weird. That was weird.
Go with it.
Okay.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you.
Happy to have
Thanks.
you.
How you been?
I'm good. Like I said, happy to be here.
Our listeners and now viewers have been asking, when's she gonna be back on the show?
Have
She's
they
our
actually?
favorite.
Or are you just
Yeah.
saying that too?
No, that's true. That's
no,
true.
That's
This is completely factual.
That's legitimate. She's like,
Wow.
she's our favorite host. And then we're like, she was a guest. She's not a host. And then she's like, what? And then she's like,
They're like,
why don't you have more women on the show?
and then we're like,
And then Gabe throws up his hands for the people listening to the podcast.
I think I've just transitioned more to the viewers. I've just
Yeah.
I
That's
think it's
why
just viewers now.
Yeah, I'm the audience. I mean, I'm the voice for the
Well,
audience.
the thing is, like, I've realized, like, listening back to the episodes that, like, I kind of stopped, but like viewing has got me back to actually watching our episodes.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think Link mentioned. We're not mentioning him. I don't know.
Who?
There's
Who?
a guy that I used to do this show with, who mentioned that he didn't listen to the show, and I stopped listening to this show. But I think I'm watching it now, and it's kind of like breathe new life, at least for me.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Like actually
Yeah.
being on camera.
It's a new medium, and I think it's super interesting.
Okay, so for those of us watching on YouTube, and yes, those of us, because I'm one of them, keep watching. Thanks for the support. But yes, this is our first video episode with our first remote guest. We usually have a remote host who's gone somewhere again.
In the
But
forest.
Yep. But our first remote guest, thank you for joining us on this topic that I think is very important to you as much as it is to us. We're going to be talking about fantasy this week.
Fantasy? Football?
No. I
No.
don't feel equipped to talk about that.
Fantasy soccer?
No. Have you ever played fantasy sports, Leigh?
Yeah, I did fantasy football at work. I wasn't very good. I'm not very consistent is the issue. But I did start fantasy F1 this year. I also fell off of that, but it was the first time I was actually like properly interested in something. So maybe next year.
Fantasy F1.
Yeah, I know. I was so intrigued by this. We don't have time to go into
The thing,
this
if you want to
'cause-
start a league next season,
Yeah, I'm just
Right?
gonna
That's
put
how
it
you
all.
say
I'm
it?
just,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put it all on Ferrari and just have my hopes and dreams crushed.
Okay. This might be another episode, but I am so fascinated. We'll talk about this after we're done, but fantasy F1, that's crazy. But no, we're going to talk about fantasy. How would you define fantasy?
Me?
Feel free, anyone, to respond.
I defer to Leigh.
no. I feel like I should
No.
have looked up Cut to
Should've
me.
known that was coming.
10 minutes ago. Should have Googled that.
Nah, just like, what is fantasy to you? Like, how would you define it?
I don't know. I feel like in a basic sense, like I want to say there's like a bullet point list of things that need to be included in something for it to be considered fantasy.
Magic.
Magic and
Elves.
Yeah, elves or
Elves, for
fae
some-
or
elves above
dragons.
anything. Elves above
Yeah.
anything need
Yeah.
to be in it.
Yeah, agreed.
That's it. That's
Yeah,
the list.
I guess just something that takes place in a world that doesn't exist.
Okay.
Yeah, like I guess the use of either like some mysterious power, mythical creature,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
there's something out there. I know we were talking about this earlier, but I heard you consider something that most people wouldn't consider to be fantasy.
Yeah, everybody talks about like the epitome of sci-fi, which is Star Wars. And I would argue that Star Wars is more fantasy than it is sci-fi. Science fiction is typically defined with some kind of like idealization of technology. But to me, Star Wars, it takes place in a distant past rather than the future. Sci-fi usually takes place in the future, and it's all like space wizards and like sword fighting.
Yeah, and this
Uh,
magical property called the Force. Yeah.
So
Exact-
magic and space. Where I come from, they're one and the same.
Is Thor fantasy? I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, fantasy, I guess, has a lot of similarities with like Norse mythology and
No,
Yeah.
and I think, I mean, this isn't a conversation about Star Wars, but I think that's one of the things that like attracts so many people to it, is that it's such like a unique mix of both. Like it's so defining in that aspect
yeah.
where like, yeah, you have sci-fi, but it's not the same thing as Star Trek. Star
Yeah.
Trek I consider to be sci-fi.
Mhm. Yeah.
And while that's great, I think that the way that Star Wars mixes both like kind of like the mythology with science fiction, or the fantasy and science fiction, is one of those like just main points that I like so many people gravitate towards it, so like myself. So
Oh, I thought somebody was gonna fight me on me defining Star Wars as fantasy.
No, wrong crowd. If you want someone to fight you on that,
I've heard we're supposed to.
maybe someone on the internet.
Yeah. Okay, but what's the
no,
earliest?
no. We already have too much disagreement on the internet. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good
Well,
point.
we're therapy. We're a place where we come together, and
Yeah,
if we actually
positivity.
disagree, we can work that out.
Okay. What's some of the earliest memories you have of fantasy? Where do you define your connection to fantasy?
I guess I'll start. I think fantasy, for the most part, I mean, obviously, Lord of the Rings. Like, Lord of the Rings.
How old were you when you first?
What year did the second one come out? 2001, 2000,
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2001, I think. 2001. I'm pretty sure went to the theaters. Don't really remember it.
You hadn't read a book before. You hadn't.
No, I think. I really think Lord of the Rings is like kind of what got me interested. Like then reading at school, like King Arthur and the tales like that, and his knights.
Some of those older mythologies.
Yeah, and his knights like around the round table. I think that's kind of stuff really like Lord of the Rings really set that. And especially like I guess growing up, my dad was really into it, so he'd like take me to Renaissance festivals.
Renaissance fairs. Yes.
Just stuff like that, like I guess. And like thinking now about it, I'm like, man, that was really a big part of my childhood. I'd have like a fake like wooden sword and a shield. I'd have like a whole outfit. And I remember my dad used to buy like the Lord of the Rings swords.
Yeah.
Which I thought were the coolest thing when I was a kid. But yeah,
Awesome.
I think Lord of the Rings has to be like the thing that like threw me into that world.
Yeah. It's funny. So you're saying that Lord of the Rings like submerged you into that kind of tradition in literature and film, but then you're going back to some experiences that even predate that, like the Renaissance Fair festivals.
Thinking about like the Renaissance Festival, we used to go almost like every year when I was a kid, and that used to be such like an integral part of me growing up.
Yeah.
Just like the culture, and I think that's what made me so interested in like medieval periods and like actual history, and the way it's like, yes, Lord of the Rings is fantasy, but that aspect of it like kind of being medieval made me so much more interested in history classes about that stuff. When I was learning about all of it, it was so fascinating to me that it's like, bro, this guy Arthur, he's just like Aragorn. Like this guy's awesome.
Yeah.
So stuff like that I think is interesting, where it's like it comes from a place of fiction, but how it can translate to the real world, or like where these things basically come from, like their origins and things like that.
Right.
I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think it's so cool that you have these like memories from younger where you like went to, like I went to my first Renaissance fair this year. And that was like a big thing for me because I
By the way, this is a shout out to Leigh.
I went dressed.
Leigh's outfit for the Renaissance Festival was fantastic.
Dan, if you're out there in the forest and you can hear us, put that in the show notes. Okay.
And for any social media manager out there, I think we should put that on our socials. But yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you
I'll pass the message.
So you said this year was your first one?
Yeah, this is my first Renaissance fair, but I have always had a love for that. I think for me, I'm trying to think maybe like early on, first fantasy, I think of like Magic Treehouse or like Magic School Bus. That's like a version of fantasy that I think
Hmm.
for me first existed. I
Okay.
didn't growing up, I'm the oldest of my like generation, the oldest girl at least of my
Yeah.
generation.
Mhm.
So I didn't have anybody to like teach me that. My parents aren't into fantasy really or anything like that. So I didn't have anybody like introduce me to that. So it's been like me discovering that on my own as I've gotten older, and then you meet people and friends and people then share that with you, and you go into that. So like Lord of the Rings, things like that I didn't get into until I was a bit older, but I think there's always been a love of fantasy and the medieval world. I think I've always been drawn to movies and stuff like that. I was thinking the other day, I'm pretty sure in the fourth grade, fourth or fifth grade maybe, I went dressed as someone like from the Renaissance. Like I had like a red velvet dress and like the headpiece. And like what fourth grader in
Yeah.
South Florida is wearing that? Like that's just not a thing. So I think I've just always had like a deep love for it. That probably came from books and reading and turned into what it is now.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned fantasy being tied into that medieval period, and I don't even think I had made that connection before. Because if you're saying when did I get into fantasy, yeah, I'm gonna jump into like Lord of the Rings, and I think I saw the animated Lord of the Rings like growing up as a kid. I didn't understand what any of it meant. I read The Hobbit in 8th grade. You talk about like knights and toys. Your father and me had like armies, like entire like legions of
That was
soldiers.
that was literally it. Like we had the Fisher Price, like full castle sets, full like
Multiple
different.
castles.
Okay, we had like three different armies. The only thing different about them was that they were different colors. So that's like how you
Yeah.
differentiate the armies. And then it was between playing with those toys, the wrestling toys, and Star Wars toys.
Yeah.
That was like
Right.
what I
Which
mostly
are
played
three
with.
Yeah.
things that you still love now.
Exactly.
And if you get other toys, you find a way to like reconfigure them into those
Dude, it
worlds.
was like Fortnite. It
Maybe.
was like Fortnite, but like as a kid, just
Yeah.
throwing things together and then them fighting each other. Like I had Gandalf fighting who was it, Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And then they were
Wow.
like, "Oh, we're actually friends. Let's team up." The thing is, what's weird? Having to pay for bad guys
Yes.
because you need a plot
Uh-huh.
and the heroes need to fight somebody. But it's like, do I want to buy a bad guy? You kind of have to.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And I've never got it into like RPGs, tabletops, and like especially the ones that include like you buying armies and units and stuff like
Like
that.
Warhammer and stuff.
Yeah, like Warhammer, for example. But with those Fisher Price toys, we got to the point where we created rule sets. Like we basically
Oh,
had
with
a
the die
handbook.
and yes, I remember.
We had our
that.
own die rule sets, like how to roll damage, eat. Like we would upgrade every battle. Like we would keep stats for every individual soldier.
Yeah, I didn't learn math in school. I learned math at home.
Yeah.
By playing these games.
Because we would upgrade them by rank. Like they would start as just like a foot soldier, and then like if they survived several games, they would become a captain in the army.
No, that
And
joint's crazy. I remember the first time I saw a 20-sided die, I was like, "What? There's 20?" I was
And-
freaking out.
And I remember once we also decided like, okay, if a character dies, he's dead.
He's
Like
dead.
you can't use him anymore, but you can repaint him, and you could deploy him, start over from the bottom again.
Crazy.
And that was my like kind of ghetto experience with those kind of games. I've never allowed myself to get into those games because I have friends that are really into it, and it's a lot of time and it's a lot of money, and I just haven't allowed myself to like fall in love with that genre for fear.
No, yeah. I mean, it's hard. Believe me, I know. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. Like looking back at it now, the way that like fantasy and all these things that we used to either watch or consume, for me at least, really shaped my creativity, like my creative nature as a kid,
Yes.
and how I would form stories and plot lines with the toys that I would make. It's like if I couldn't watch a movie or TV or something like that, I would make my own,
Mhm.
make my own in the story. So it's like it really drove me creatively, I think, as a kid to be able to, get some inspiration in in that fantastical world,
Uh-huh.
and then move on, build from there in the real world, for me at least.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you guys think? This doesn't have to be like a long-winded answer, but what do you guys think it is about fantasy that like draws so many people to it? Like, why is it so popular?
I think it starts back to that medieval thing. I think with like the stories that people have been telling for centuries, you just naturally, at least I do, I naturally gravitate towards that stuff. And I think the fantasy allows you to take it a step further into things that it's like it's not real. And but I think creatively you can do more. You can go further. Like any character that I make in a game or anything that happens, I'm choosing a knight. I'm choosing a warrior class. Like that's
Mhm.
just something that I gravitate towards because of characters like Aragorn, characters like King Arthur, the people like I don't know, just like characters based off of honor or doing the right thing, clearly have a sword somehow. Like
Uh-huh.
that's just or like Luke Skywalker in that sense. Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker is like a knight to
Yeah.
me.
A
Like he's a
sword, a
Jedi. He's a
saber, a
Jedi knight.
wand, whatever
Right.
it is. Yeah.
And I think it's like, it's Obi-Wan, right? Who alludes to it. It's like a weapon for a more civilized time.
Exactly.
I think
Mhm.
and we're getting to the MacGuffin of this conversation like already, because I think it's kind of already just unearthed itself. Like, 15 minutes into this conversation.
I think it's just such like a big topic for each of us that it's like it's hard not to just jump straight
Yeah,
into
just
that.
jump into it.
Yeah, because I think we look at the world today and we think about, like army and guns and bombs and stuff like that. And there's almost something like,
It's too real.
yeah, it's not valorous, but when you have
Yeah.
that like sword in your hand and like
There's
the
honor in it.
chivalry, yeah, there's
Mhm.
chivalry, there's honor, there's valor, and things were simpler back then. And I think it's a sense of escapism because like we don't have magicians or orcs or elves. This isn't Warcraft, which is one of my earlier
Yeah.
fantasy experiences, right? Warcraft 1, 2, 3.
The good old days.
Eventually, yeah, before World of Warcraft, which I also won't let myself get addicted to. But we don't have those things. That's a sense of escapism. But at the end of the day, we have a real life time period that we can like point to and be like, this is kind of the basis or the root of what defines at least the human level of fantasy.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the humans part in the story could happen. Like it could have happened and it could still happen today to some degree. We still relate to those very human characters.
Yeah, and I think it's just as time progresses and the way that you see different, like you see life differently, your perspective changes. I think that the way that you look for these things, you search for these things, especially like creatively or like however you like to like, the way that you take fantasy in or the way that you take anything in. I mean, obviously like your tastes tend to change. Like I remember, like I said, Lord of the Rings growing up, that was my thing, loved it to death. And then I remember when this little show, it wasn't really a big deal. It came and went. It was called like Game of Thrones came around.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And
no big deal.
I remember I was getting into when was that? I was in high school. I think it was like a sophomore or something. And I remember like the first that like there was some like ads on it, and I was like, I just remember I was like, this seems like Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna watch it. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything about books. I didn't think about anything else. But I ended up watching the first episode. I'm like, Boromir's in it. I'm watching this.
Right.
Like, and after that,
And,
like,
and as a lead.
yeah, and he's like the main character of the show. And then
Yeah.
like week to week, the like progressing, watching that. I was like, man, this is great. I shouldn't be watching. Maybe I shouldn't be watching this like at this age. Maybe it's too much for me, but who cares? I've been doing this since I was like 6.
You've been watching Game of Thrones since you were 6?
No, I've been watching like stuff I shouldn't have been watching.
You're watching Dream On
like
HBO?
what was it? Troy, like
Oh, okay.
Troy, like the Brad Pitt one.
Yeah.
Or the other Helen of Troy is the one I was thinking.
Oh, yeah. Hello, Troy. That was on NBC. Also, is Troy, I think, is Troy rated R? I think.
The director's cut.
We just, oh, okay.
Like
Yeah,
you knew
but
what the director's cut was back then.
Exactly.
It's unrated.
So, and then like towards the end, like obviously it has adult themes, and I was like, I never saw this stuff in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Like, and like as an adult, oh no, I was an adult at the time, but I was like growing up, I was like, what I was watching fantasy wise was changing right before my eyes.
It was growing up.
Exactly. It was taking just like mature themes and putting it into this world that to me was just like fantastical, but like in a sense innocent with the things that it was like talking about and saying and doing, like the nudity in Game of Thrones for instance.
Yeah.
And like all
sometimes to uncomfortable levels.
and like the excessive violence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And for
Brutal.
the first couple of seasons, like it is a bit much to like for me at least. But I think the main thing was spoilers. If you haven't seen Game of Thrones, I'm about to spoil something, so stop listening and maybe watch Game of Thrones. I don't know.
Yeah. If only Wong would have done that on the She-Hulk show.
I still haven't seen the end of She-Hulk, so don't repeat it. Thank you.
You haven't seen the end of have you finished Sopranos?
No.
Do not watch.
Yeah, don't watch She-Hulk.
Do not watch She-Hulk.
Yeah, I know you told me I got spoiled like 5 times.
I was mad for like a week.
That's on you. I came out so long ago.
I was 2 episodes from it.
That's it. It's not every. Well, I mean, I guess you're right. No,
I was
yeah.
2 episodes from that one.
Okay, that sucks for you specifically,
Granted,
but
came
that's
out
not
so
on
long
them.
ago.
Like, eventually you can
Yeah.
reference things that happen.
Sorry. You lose that argument.
Where was I going? Oh yes. So spoilers, when Ned dies.
Yes.
When Ned
Rest
dies,
in
I was
peace.
like, oh,
Bye.
okay, this is what's happening.
Mhm.
Ned Stark necklace.
It's not just Ned Stark too, because also Drago, right? Is that his name?
Khal Drogo, yeah.
Yeah, Khal Drago. He dies too. Because this is me all through those first 10 episodes. It's like this show's amazing because of these 2 characters. Boom, they're both gone.
Yeah, and I mean it really subverts expectation in that sense. I'm just like, huh, that's the main character.
Yeah.
What do you have left?
Even then, it's like, to me, Drago's like the main character of the other one.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, because she hasn't really emerged. You know, Khaleesi hasn't really. That's the thing that's gonna, like, the fire that's gonna refine and harden the character, because she's so subservient to her older brother and then Drago that it's like, am I pronouncing that
Yeah.
weirdly? Because I always think of the boxer.
Called Drogo.
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 Mhm.
She's subservient to like both of them, and then this is the thing that, like, you know, that leads to her being a lead on the show.
But it's like taking that, like doing, like making that choice and using that kind of like a high stature character and using it for the progression of another character, I think is part of what I'm saying. Like story choices. Like
Yeah.
obviously it's a book, but like for me watching that, I was used to like very like simple plots. Like, you know, you could like it's pretty easy to see what's coming next. But I think that's just like one of the first times where it's like expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
With that type of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
You read these books, Leonie?
I read the first 3 and then
Okay.
I didn't, not because they weren't good. I just think I was like in college, probably just couldn't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
The show was
I-
great. So
I had a friend recommend the books. Like, they got me a graphic novel, Hedge Knight. I liked it. I thought it was good. So I checked out the first book. I didn't love it. I'm really bad personally with like names and dates. So
and
it's
that's
like
that's so many names and dates.
you need to annotate, because by the
Yeah.
end of the book, like, things were happening to people who I didn't even know who they were. Like,
Mhm.
there's so many characters.
Yeah, I think that's also a big thing in fantasy in general. I've realized, I think that's why, although fantasy is really popular, it's maybe not for everyone. I think because it is usually pretty complex, a lot of different storylines, a lot of different characters. Sometimes the names are really hard to pronounce, all those
Mhm.
things. And I think some people just can't process all of that.
And
I think it's a factor that I love, but
yeah, no, for sure. Because I mean, it's challenging, and I mean, as like a person that's consuming this stuff, I would like to be challenged. It's not always about like turning my brain off. Like sometimes
Right.
you want to actually use it.
Yeah.
But it requires commitment.
exactly.
And some people just don't
and I
have it.
think that, I mean, especially in today's world, like it's tough.
Yeah, it
with
can be a
everything you've got.
it can be a barrier for entry. Look, I'm thinking now about why I haven't deep dive fantasy more, and it's probably that, like, committing to these worlds. Like, I love Lord of the Rings, and I know like a fair amount of it, but I always feel like I should know more. Like, I should, and I think it's that, going back to my Star Wars thing, not to harp on an example, that's the world that I know. Like, I know that guy that's on screen for like 2 seconds in the bar, and like I know what this guy did before he showed up in this and in that like that's how I know Star Wars characters. That's my fantasy world. And sometimes it can feel overwhelming to be like, I have to know Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and who knows whatever series as deep as that. That's a lot of knowledge, because I am a big
it's commitment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said
Go
it's
ahead.
a commitment.
No, she was just saying.
Oh, it is a commitment. Yeah, absolutely. And because I am like a history buff, and like I like maps, probably not as much as like fantasy people.
Just not into
Right, but
cartography and
Yeah, I like the ideas, but when it comes to like I said, names and dates, it can be a bit much, especially like it's not real. Maybe I should probably learn some kind of ancient period in real life more than like investing 200 plus hours into learning these things. But I respect people who do. Like,
yeah, I should have been focusing on school. Instead, I was like deep diving Game of Thrones characters and houses and where they come from and where things could have because this is before the show was over. So
Right.
it was like after season 7 came out, I just binge watched the whole show again and then just went on YouTube, just mindless hours, just deep diving stuff that it's like, what is this knowledge for? But it's like it's just like this craving that you get that you just want to keep looking
it
into
all
it.
led to this day. It all led.
Exactly. It's all for
You've
this.
been prepping your whole life for this. You could have
But
been
yeah.
anywhere in the world.
You could have been born at any moment.
Gabe, you talked about like your love growing up. We talked to Leilani extensively for over an hour about YA novels in season 1. And if you haven't listened to the YA dystopia Oxyopia episode with Leilani, go back and give that a listen. But I think there's some overlap between that and this topic, but because I think some of the earlier fantasy, some of the outside, before we deep dive into specifically Game of Thrones and the new series House of the Dragon, I got the name right that time, right? House of the Dragon and Rings of Power. Some of those other series tend to like kind of aim younger. What are some of the series that you've read throughout your like years? Even though for younger, not necessarily like when you were young. It could have been now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Gabe mentioned Chronicles of Narnia, definitely. Harry Potter, I think, is a big one.
Yeah.
Although I read that when I was a bit older.
Harry Potter's interesting because it's like sometimes we don't think about like that real magic, like witch. I mean, they have goblins, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's more like witches and like magic. Is it different than fantasy? Does that fall into that genre?
Yeah.
I think so.
I think it's different, which is why I think it's so interesting and fascinating. Like I think that's why people gravitate towards. That's why I like it. I enjoy it. Maybe not as much as like the next person. It's like some people I feel like grew up on Harry Potter. Some people grew up on Lord of the Rings. Some people did both.
Yeah.
I was just like a super like fantasy wise.
It's an easy transition to the other.
Yeah, and like I guess I didn't watch a lot of Harry Potter when I was a little kid because for some reason I was allowed to watch Lord of the Rings, but not Harry Potter.
Right.
Right.
So then I was able to like catch up and watch them. Like this story is great, and I enjoyed watch. I was able to watch the last couple of ones in theaters, before it ended. But the fact that it is different because it's in a modern time period, and you're bringing that fantasy into like our world.
Yeah.
I think that's super cool. Like another book series for me that I would read was Percy Jackson.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was, man. Like I had this, maybe it stemmed from the medieval and fantasy obsession, but I was super into Greek mythology.
Yeah, no, Greek mythology.
Same.
It's amazing. Like as a teacher, so many students are drawn to Greek mythology, which you'd think would be like a hard sell because it's so old and ancient. But I think it's this. If you grow up like consuming these kind of stories, like your Harry Potter, your, I don't know how into like Lord of the Rings you are at a younger age. Sure, there's definitely a crowd, but like your Percy Jacksons, for example, that's an easy hook. Once someone's read or seen Percy Jackson, then they will just read like entire histories on like the characters that they're based
the
on.
Odyssey and
No, I mean, especially like because that falls into that, like, let's say there's a Venn diagram of like YA, fantasy, like modern period, like whatever it is, like, and the fact
they're gateway drugs, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
like because you have that aspect of the Greek mythology, but then you have this obviously this character who's not necessarily an adult, like they're coming of age, sure, but this kid's like a teenager,
Yeah.
and at that age, I'm the same age as him when I'm reading his stories, and it's like this hero embarking on the hero's quest, the hero's journey,
Mm-hmm.
going through all those things, and it's like it's very relatable, it's very easy to relate to and put yourself in that position, and then seeing the other characters in that fantasy world, having like being able to mix both.
Yeah.
It was so close to like you have reality, but then you also have the fantasy aspect, and it's coming together as one. And it's you just I get lost in it.
Yeah. I think
It's so easy to do that.
So
Yeah.
easy.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's translated like in their language. You know, these are ancient texts, right? That are kind of brought forth to them. And if you have someone who kind of like guides you and like magnifies it, it's also nice to like read about like murder, rape, sex, all these taboo topics. And for some reason, it's okay to do it if the book was written like thousands of years ago. Like you can do it in the classroom. You
Yeah.
can talk about it with your friends and teacher. You're not gonna get in trouble. Your parents are gonna be okay.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like we think about some, and we'll probably get into it when we talk about the shows, especially like House of the Dragon. But some of those taboo topics that get covered, they're in these texts that we're like teaching 15 and 16, year olds. And like we don't bat an eyelash at them in those contexts, but we do today, obviously, probably because of the visual component. But I think it goes beyond that. I think there's definitely a double standard on what's current and modern versus what's like old and traditional.
Yeah, because I mean, there really isn't. I think a big thing is the visual component.
Mm-hmm.
Like to say the word rape and then to see it portrayed.
Yeah,
I feel like it's two completely different things.
absolutely,
Obviously,
absolutely.
but I think also a piece of it does give you context because I mean, hopefully, never mind. When you see it like on screen,
Mm-hmm.
it gives you more context if you ever go back and read those things, or whenever you read it in a book or something like that. It's like there's a bit more context visually. You have that memory,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it can make that more impactful.
Yeah. And it's a double-edged sword because I think when done right and artistically, the right emotion is like sent to the viewer.
Yeah, it's portrayed the way it's portrayed, and like the way that the viewer receives it.
But also we live in like a HBO style world, and I guess it's time to just like
I mean, in a sense, it's like it's a bit romanticized in a way, in a strange way. That's how it feels like sometimes, where it's like I watch a movie like what was it, The Kite Runner.
Mm-hmm.
The Kite Runner. There's a certain scene like that, and I mean Kite Runner came to my mind because that's something that's like the way that they portrayed that. It's like you feel the emotion. Obviously, you can
it's
never
like burned into your memory.
Exactly,
too,
you
right?
can never feel
Yeah.
what that person felt like in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that emotion that feel like whatever the person's going through is excellently portrayed in that film. In the
Right.
book. I mean, because you read it in the book, and yes, it's a terrible traumatic experience, but actually watching in the film
Mm-hmm.
with like no music going on, it's dead silent. It's just like this is what it is to be like in that scene. It's something you can't really compare. But yes, like you were saying, HBO kind of does this a lot. I guess with the mature themes.
That was like something I balked at when I at first jumped into Game of Thrones. Now into House of the Dragon, having gone through that experience for several years, I had my trepidation getting back on board. First response. I know we covered it like in the beginning is the end is the beginning is the end, whatever the name of our first episode this season was. We kind of gave like a little mini like, hey, this is what we've been watching. This is what we think so far. We were halfway through it. What was your guys' impression? How do you guys feel now that I assume you both finished watching House of the Dragon? Yeah.
Yes.
First.
So go ahead, Leon.
I very much enjoyed it. I don't know. No, I enjoyed it, and I thought it was I thought it was done well, and we can obviously go deeper into that. But I think half of it is just being excited to be back in that universe, in that world that we like know and love, and spent so many years giving ourselves emotionally to. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I was pleased with it.
Okay,
I'm
what's
excited for the rest of it.
all right? What's so great about the show? You have to pitch it to. I know a portion of our audience hasn't watched the show, doesn't watch the show. This genre, even though it is popular, it is a niche genre, even within genres. I myself, I had difficulty getting through. I watched. Man, how far? I think I got 4 left. Right, I'm like a month behind.
You got like 3 left.
Yeah, I got like 3 or 4 left because it's very. I don't want to use the word adult or adult. I don't want to use the word adult because that's not a word. I don't want to use the word adult or mature because that's almost
That's
like
a new word now.
adult.
Yeah.
It's almost like euphemizing. Like it's strong. It's graphically strong. In regards to violence, which I'm pretty much okay with for the most part. But also sex and some other taboo topics. And it's just a real dark show in the sense that I don't find a lot of light and hopefulness. And I probably would have drudged on just to finish it for the sake of the show. But my wife was really like, do we have to watch it? I don't feel like watching it. Part of that is probably huge hangover and post-traumatic stress from the end of Game of Thrones. Like, do I even want to watch another Game of Thrones show? So there's kind of like that attitude going into it. But what would you say you enjoyed about this show, and what would you find it pleasing? I don't know if that was the right word, pleasing.
Yeah, the show is pleasing, I guess.
Okay.
It was quite pleasing.
I mean, I feel like, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, finding characters to root for, but also what was so good about Game of Thrones at the beginning was not knowing what to expect, and this show managed to do that again. I think. I don't know where you're at on the show yet specifically, but it does manage to do that.
I just did the time jump where the characters are older. Spoilers, sorry.
Gotcha.
The last one.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a spoiler.
That happens that happens throughout the whole.
That happens
does it really?
times.
So
Yeah,
the first
it
one.
does.
So the first one. So the first time.
The first time, which is the biggest one, I would think.
Yeah, when they get new actors, basically.
Yeah. When they 2 new actors, that's it.
Oh, okay.
And some actors don't get aged up. Whatever.
This has been
That's
pretty
the first one.
well publicized. That's funny that you say the unexpected and not being able to know where. I tried to avoid spoilers and I kind of got like hints and stuff. Is that difficult now? It is based on a book. I don't know how closely it follows it. From what I understood, pretty closely. Yes.
I think
I don't
they
think
just make
any
some
of us read
changes.
it. Yeah.
We didn't read it, but
No,
like,
I know.
from what I've read.
Okay,
from
so
what
that's
I've
my
seen,
question.
Yeah.
I know that you haven't read it, but in this day and age, you don't even have to read it to know, like, basically what happens and the reputation. You have to actively avoid. Did you guys actively avoid any spoilers for the show?
After I saw one, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to think if I had to like actively avoid. I think I like made it a point to watch every episode when it came out for that reason, because I think it's hard to watch anything, but especially a show like that and get on. I just wouldn't get on Twitter or any form of any form of social media if I wanted to avoid spoilers.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, like you kind of have to get to it really quickly to to avoid that stuff. But I don't know. There's also something that I missed about Game of Thrones. There's that aspect that it's like it's 9:00. Most people are in their house watching on a Sunday, like watching this with you. You may not be talking to them or like being there with them present, but like it's like.
But it's happening. It's like a community thing.
You know it's there, and then you can talk about it with your friends the next day and group chats and all this stuff.
Yeah. There is. So from my window, which you can't see, but from my window, I face another building, and a lot of people have their windows open, and we like looked and saw other people, like if other people were watching it, and we saw like 3 or 4 people watching at the same time, which is just like a great thing, and kind of that sense of community, like you said.
So what you're telling me is you enjoy watching the show because it allows you to commit voyeuristic acts to your neighbors and invade their privacy.
If you leave your shades up, you're inviting people to look in your house.
You're inviting them into your home. That's it.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I don't make the rules.
Yeah, just follow. That's the thing about Game of Thrones in the sense where it was like, I had friends that I could never force them to actually sit down and watch Lord of the Rings, especially the extended editions. Like they just wouldn't do it.
Mhm.
They're not gonna commit to that. But I had friends binging Game of Thrones.
Well, because I actually had friends that aren't into fantasy, would never watch fantasy. They're the ones
And
telling
watch this.
me to watch Game of Thrones with the original series.
Exactly.
I was like, everyone
Yeah.
is watching the show. I
And-
guess I need to check it out.
And that's the thing, like, and I'm not like super huge into like, all these like popular shows that are watching, like what is it, like Squid Games or like
yeah,
the Dahmer series. Like some things I just don't really have an interest in, so I won't necessarily watch them just to watch them because I know even though it's big, a lot of people tend to watch it,
Right.
and sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. But Game of Thrones is just one of those things where it's like towards the end when people caught up and finished the binge,
yeah.
I had people coming over my house like when I was in college, and we'd have giant watch parties, and it was like hype. Every time something
Yeah,
would happen,
same.
everybody yelling, and like the energy was great.
hmm
I mean, and then the last season, but
Well, I mean, but did you have a watch party for that final episode?
yeah, I
So
was actually getting off of a plane, and this episode started in 20 minutes, and I just landed, and I was like, "Get me out of here right now!" And it was crazy. Like you go through that last episode, you see how it ends, and it's like I don't know how to feel about that. What just happened? And then the credits run. It's like this is the last time I'm gonna watch like Game of Thrones like this. Like
Mhm.
this is the last Sunday I'm gonna be able to see this with these people, and it's just there was a certain like just kind of like you had to be there moment
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
show, the phenomenon that it was, and like you said, grabbing people that aren't into fantasy and then putting them and then like making them watch this stuff. Even like for me, I enjoyed it. To me,
Yeah.
for the most part, like I enjoyed the experience. Like yeah, the latter seasons weren't as strong, I think, but I think as a whole, I enjoyed the experience of being able to connect with people that really didn't think would be into that type of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and to get them into that. So for me, House of the Dragon coming back, like a new Game of Thrones title coming back, for me that was exciting because I knew that towards the latter seasons, when they started straying off was when the book stopped being written, like where they had that source material from.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, you're making there is source material for this story, and it's like
How much?
this story
You
is
know?
done. I'm not gonna.
I know
pretend
there's
to
just.
think.
I only know of one book. Is there other books?
It's just one book.
Okay.
And I mean, there is a giant spoiler in Game of Thrones. I mean, I don't know if anyone's come across it yet, but
Okay.
like there is a mention of like, I guess the main thing, and like how they're gonna handle that, I'm interested to see. But the fact that it was coming up, like I can feel like certain hype. I didn't want to get myself too excited because
Mhm.
I mean, but the fact that we're getting another Game of Thrones show, I'm sick. I'm with it. And then
and there's a sense of familiarity too. There's a sense of almost trust because, like you said, didn't watch Squid Games, didn't watch Dahmer. These are kind of like fashionable shows to watch.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
you know this show's gonna be around
They're gonna
for a while.
Exactly. They're gonna. I would hope they would deliver. That's the thing. Like, maybe I'm too trusting. But it's like at this point, you saw the criticisms. You saw where the ship went wrong.
They can't possibly
Let's
repeat the same
let's,
mistakes.
like exactly. I'm hopeful in that aspect.
Yeah.
And
I think they also had the author kind of on board, and he was kind of hyping up the show before, so I feel like that really gave me that like sense of peace, and I was like, I think this is going to be good. I don't want to like say it too loud, but I think this is going to be good.
exactly. And that's the thing where it was like watching that first episode with you. I mean, I was already telling you, I was like, but this is better than some of the Game of Thrones episodes we've seen.
Yeah, honestly, that premiere was like it was movie quality
it's
basically.
It's
Yeah.
like it's medieval. It's a medieval. They have the whole tournament. They have like all that stuff, and then you got dragons. And you're just putting dragons in
Yeah,
there.
that's all you need.
Yeah. I guess that's the big part of it too is obviously the writing I think is the main. I think there's definitely a shock factor where you can't really obviously there's source material, so like yes, if you read that you do know what's going to happen, but I think even then if you're reading it and you're following the story, it's I don't think it's that easy to predict. And I think that's how it kind of takes you in because you're hooked on these stories and these people, and a lot of the times the people do unexpected things, and the people that you think are going to survive don't, and sometimes the worst people do, and I think it's a combination of that, all of those things that kind of make it interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Like you just kind of get invested in these characters, I think.
Mhm.
And so like a lot of them you maybe don't want to root for. Some of them you kind of do, and the other ones you're just like, I'm not cheering for you. I don't wish bad against you, but you're just a ball of chaos, and I'm interested to see what you're gonna supply to this.
So is that like the character Damon? Is that the character that
He's literally, he does not care about anything, but he cares about everything too much that he just he does anything on a whim and just he does not care. And that
He does
to
what
me,
he feels.
exactly.
he's a ball of emotion?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he doesn't he doesn't
Unpredictable.
like show it. Like he just does it. He's just a man of action. He just does things.
Mhm.
Like he's not talk. And I think especially like when there's so many people trying to restrain themselves, like in the characters, like try to restrain themselves based on their position, try not to do anything too hasty. He's just like, I don't care. I'm sending it. Like I'm fully
So
sending
is that
it.
like an air of stoicism, a heart of fury?
Yeah. For Damon,
Yeah.
Pure impulse.
for sure. Like there's not one like it's not like he really just yells. He's so imposing and commanding, but he's quiet. He's quiet. Like he's like the way that he speaks, the way that he carries himself. Matt Smith is
Matt
just
Smith
a
is-
fantastic
He's
actor.
incredible.
He's amazing.
Just
and I
with the
think-
look, and you know it's
and
about to go down.
And he just embodies that. I think he just does so well in that role, in that character, that it's like that to me alone is like enough to watch the show. Like to see what he's up, the antics that he's up to this week, and how he's like just gonna throw a wrench in everyone's plans. Like I don't know if you love your brother or you don't.
Oh,
I don't-
even by the end of season 1, you're uncertain, or
I just never know with him if he's being honest or not. I don't know what he actually cares about and what he doesn't.
he's
Yeah.
like Xanatos in the Gargoyles animated series.
That's a throwback.
Gosh,
It's a deep cut.
that is. Oh well, that's one of my earlier also
Yeah, that's
exposure to fantasy. Yeah, it's got knights. It's got Merlin. It's got there's a lot of Shakespeare. Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah.
And that, if anyone hasn't seen Gargoyles, I think it's all on Disney Plus. That
Mhm.
show is fire.
Disney
Because
Plus.
Xanatos has this one line. Spoilers for Gargoyles, 1994 through 6. Xanatos eventually ends up marrying Fox, which is one of the like group of assassins of like the pack animal villains, and he has this line where like their vows are to love each other as much as people like them can. And it was like, this man loves this woman, but is not sure that he is capable of actual love. So as close to love as Xanatos can like feel, that's what Xanatos vows in this moment. And I say that line to my wife all the time. It was like, I love you as much as two people like us can love one another. And like, I guess that's it. That's Damon.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure he does in his way.
In his own way,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's the thing that I think is so interesting about these modern fantasy shows. Like, I mean, Game of Thrones and House of Dragon. House of the Dragon is so
You're Latino, aren't you?
it's just so interesting to see because there's so many things like in medieval media and fantasy and stuff like that that is from the perspective of someone that wrote it back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones brings a modern perspective to a story or a set piece, like, or a period that's back in those days, back in time, that it's like it brings certain modernism to it, which I think is interesting to see because it's like, when do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah. I
But-
think it also comes down to like all those underlying themes, like, yeah, these are fantasy realms and these people are fake and we don't have dragons and things like that. But all of these themes, all of these relationships, these like best friend betraying best friend and marriages and betrayals and politics is a big part of all of this as well. Those are all
Yes.
things that we're familiar with.
Rivalries.
Something
can
that's
relate to.
something that's huge in Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Politics is a big time.
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't seen Tales of the Jedi, we talked about it, I think, just last week. We were like, oh, we
I
need to watch
haven't seen
that.
it.
You've got to watch it. It's
I
amazing.
know.
It's the
I
best
know.
fantasy series on TV right now. Okay?
Wow.
Tales of the Jedi. It's a lot of politics. I love it. Anyway.
Here for it.
It's sad too. It's sad, but hopeful. Okay. I'm definitely gonna finish House of the Dragon, and maybe I'll, maybe this conversation and the end of season 1 will kind of shift my perspective. I'm not saying the show's bad. I think the show's very good. I think it's very well done. I just think that I'm looking for something a little more optimistic. Like you're saying, your pitch is like chaos and destruction. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Nope.
I'll jinx you.
Please,
Okay.
after you.
Yeah, no, it's just gonna be more chaos.
yeah,
I'm not even gonna lie to you. It's
Okay.
straight up. It's just gonna be more chaos.
I was gonna say you should take this season 1 as a prequel to the actual meat of the story. That is the Dance of Dragons.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to be honest with you. A lot is on the line here because I'm not the one that House of the Dragon needs to convince. It's my wife. Okay. Because if I drag her through these 4 weeks, it's going to determine whether we even start season 2 next year. So
It's worth watching.
It is worth watching.
It's
But
worth
like
watching.
I said, if you're looking for hope in this
This is
show,
not- This is not the show for you.
but I feel like there is another.
yeah, there is
But-
another.
Maybe that's a bigger question of maybe the hope isn't glaringly obvious. Maybe it's to be found in these certain individuals in their like willingness to keep going and trying and fighting for what they want.
And that's funny because that's exactly how I feel about the second series that's going on right now. They just finished wrapping up. Because there's almost a sense of dread and doom and foreboding destruction on the horizon. But by the end of season 1, I couldn't help but feel hope for that will to survive. And even if the sun sets on a dark day, to know that the sun rises on another, even if it is in the distant future, that show is Rings of Power. And I enjoyed this show way more than I thought I would, as I mentioned in episode 1 of this season, and perhaps even, I don't remember the last. No, I think it was episode 1 of this season was the last time we talked about it on air. This show, I enjoyed it. What about you
This
guys?
show is epic.
Yeah. I did not expect epic from Amazon. I expected they spent all their money getting the rights on it and that it would pale in comparison to the films. I'm not saying it's to the level of the films, but for a TV show, it has a lot of the same aesthetic, more so than I expected. I was expecting it to feel very disparate from the films, but I'm trying very hard, but succeeding, to make mental gymnastics of having it all fit together in my headcanon. What do you guys think?
I was very excuse me. I was very cautious.
Yeah,
I was cautiously optimistic. I won't lie.
I think I was just cautious.
I don't know. That's just the thing about me where it's like I want to hope that something is gonna be good.
I'm the same way.
Especially if it's it's attached to a title that's so close to my heart.
Yeah.
It's like, man, please be good, because it's like, for some things I'm straight up just gonna be, that looks like it's gonna suck. It's gonna be terrible.
Yeah.
But for other things where it's like, I want to have hope that it's gonna be good, because it's like I can't stand, like, I don't know, it would be so much worse if it's like something that's that dear to me and it sucked, because like I was so like, not maybe not all the characters, but those stories, that world, that realm is so near and dear to my heart
Yeah.
that it's like, if I'm gonna be immersed in it at this day and age, why can't it be good?
Yeah. I'm already past that point. I think Marvel has failed me. I think Star Wars has failed me. I think every universe that I've loved has had low points, and I think I've come to terms with the fact that, like, that's just gonna happen. There's gonna be chapters that I'm not gonna like. There's gonna be, series and even years that I'm not gonna like, and hopefully the next good one is around the corner. But I'm just going to dismiss anything that doesn't interest me and feel happy for whoever does enjoy it.
I mean, that's the thing. I feel like it mirrors life in that sense, where it's like, not everything's gonna be friggin' amazing. Not everything's gonna be the best time of your life. Like,
But why not?
I mean, in a sense, yeah, you're trying to escape. You're trying to go into but it's like, not everything is for you
Yeah, absolutely.
in that sense, and some people might love it. Some people might love Batman vs Superman and Justice League and all that stuff. And listen,
If it's for everyone, sometimes it's not for
it's
you.
not, yeah,
Yeah.
because if it's for everyone, then it's like, is it really?
It can't be
It
for
can't be.
everyone all the time.
And some people might dislike a lot of things I love. I might do the same, vice versa. But it's like, I'm happy in the sense where it's like somebody's getting some enjoyment out of it. Whoever that is, man, you're insane. But I think I'm just kidding. But I think that it mirrors life in the sense where it's like, yeah, some things just aren't gonna land for you. Some things just aren't gonna hit for you. But I don't think necessarily, for me at least, it's like a door to walk through where it's just saying, hey, I think this is gonna suck, and you're just kind of like hopeless in that sense where it's like, I try not to do that as much as possible because there are so many things there are so many things in life that will disappoint you, and that's just an unfortunate aspect of the life we live. But I always try to see, like, hopefully there's something on the horizon that I could look forward to, that this can be good. And that was one of the things with Rings of Power that I'm like, I saw the first trailer and I'm like, please be good. Please be good.
Yeah, please don't be 1.25 speed the way we accidentally watched it.
Oh, what?
What?
When we played a Lord of the Rings trailer, we had YouTube set to 1.25 speed by accident. So we were like, something's off with this show. This is weird. It doesn't look. I don't know if it's gonna be good.
The pacing is off.
Yeah. The music, the score is just so fast,
but I don't know if that was to mislead you or they were trying to hook people in, because the feeling that I got from the trailer and what I got in the show were completely different.
Yeah. That was, I think, poor
I'm
marketing.
trying to remember the trailer. I don't even remember it.
It was like modern music and lots of slow motion.
Oh, mine was fast.
And also, the filter or something with the camera quality was not the same at all.
Yeah. I was
I'm
like,
gonna have
this
to
looks.
this,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
was like,
remember.
this looks bad,
But it's like you watch the show and I'm like,
it felt lifeless.
oh my goodness. When I watched the show, it was vibrant.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the first episode, I was like,
Yeah, it popped.
Oh, okay. You
Beautiful.
got me.
How many did they give us in the first week?
2.
2, right?
No, I think
3?
it was. No, I
3?
think it was 3 or 4.
I think it was 3. I think it was 3, and then the fourth one came pretty fast. I think it
It
was
was
3.
3. It was a lot.
Because I think it was the
Which
same as Andor. Who dropped? No?
No.
Oh, now I'm not
Andor
sure.
was definitely 3.
Yeah, Andor was 3. I think maybe Lord of the
Andor
Rings was 2. They're just so long.
I'm pretty sure Lord of the Rings was 2.
I'm pretty sure it was 2 now that I think about it. But they were longer
They're like
than
an
the
hour.
3 Andors.
Well, every episode gets longer.
Yeah, which was
I don't
crazy.
care. I'm loving it.
I don't
Okay.
care. Not complaining. They were all. It was like a bunch of mini movies.
I could trim a little fat here and there, but for the most part, I'm okay with it. Especially, like, I think I said in the beginning is the end is the beginning, episode 1 of this season. We were halfway through it, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about the show. Like, I'm getting tired of it. That, and then you guys were like, did you see this week's? From that point on, those, like, I think last 3, I'm like, this show's amazing. Like, it all came together, what they were building to. But some of those longer running times were getting long in the tooth. Especially when I got, like, it drops on Friday. I get home tired from work. I got a lot of stuff going on the weekend. House of the Dragon has to drop at Sunday at 9. I'm not even awake at that time. All this stuff builds up, you know? And when you were dropping 2 and then 3 of this one, it's
Man, I'm not gonna lie. Those weeks where they overlapped, dude, we were feasting. We were eating.
Yeah, what's that famous Lord of the Rings?
It was
quote?
amazing. Oh, looks like meat's back on the menu, boys
And I think
girls.
And I think it is for fantasy fans right now. I think this is probably one of the most prolific age for fantasy film and television.
It's definitely a
Rings
good time to be a fan.
And what is film and television is just the lines are blurred. Man.
Exactly. That line is being pushed forward and back. Rings of Power. What makes this show so great? I know also a lot of people who haven't watched this show may not have gotten into Lord of the Rings. Our own producer Dan's only seen Fellowship of the Ring because we sat him down.
He started 2 Towers. I sat him down and started 2 Towers.
But if you start, he's got to start all over again now. What makes Rings of Power such a great show?
I mean,
I mean, is it a great show? Is that fair?
I think so.
Do you have to be into Lord of the Rings to enjoy the show?
See, that's the thing. Maybe. I think you might be onto something there because
I think it's definitely more enjoyable if you are.
yeah,
More, or is it a must?
I think people can get into it, but I don't think the majority. I think more people would get into like House of the Dragon or something like that more than Rings of Power.
Okay, I know this is asking for a lot, but if you had someone who's interested, should you be like, go watch the movies first and then watch Rings of Power? Or would you be like, yeah, go ahead, watch Rings of Power?
Have they never seen, like, they know nothing about Lord of the Rings?
They know nothing about
Nah, go watch Lord of the Rings. Like, you don't have to watch Rings of Power. Go watch Lord of the Rings.
But let's say they want to watch Rings of Power because it's a new show. It's on Amazon. They have it. It's free.
Go watch Lord of the Rings.
I would watch the first 10 minutes of Fellowship. And then go watch Rings of Power.
That's a good point.
And then go watch Lord of the Rings.
But go watch Lord of the Rings.
Let's say they don't have the time to or the energy to, right?
Bro, if you have the 12 hours.
If you're gonna watch, if you're gonna watch the show, watch the movies.
No,
watch the extended cut.
I'm not willing to commit. I'm not willing to commit to all 3 movies. Not even the regular versions. But I am willing to watch this show.
It's the same amount.
The trilogy of films is the same amount of time as watching season 1.
But I'm saying if they're like, I'm not going to watch the movies. They're like, I'm not going to do it. Sorry to tell you.
Don't
but
watch
I am
Rings of
interested in watching Rings of Power.
Go watch season 8 of Game of Thrones. How about that? All right, go finish.
Watch Harry Potter.
I'll let you finish.
I'm trying here.
No, go ahead.
I agree. Go watch Lord of the Rings. But
no, you're defending these monsters.
I would say go watch the first 10 minutes of Fellowship and then go watch Rings of Power. If you're never going to watch the movies, realistically some people just don't want to. But they're more willing to commit to a show.
No, she does. She has a point.
You don't think that if they watch Ring of Powers and actually enjoy it, they're going to want to go watch the movies after that?
Oh, absolutely. That's the point though.
I don't understand how that's possible. Like that wouldn't happen. Like it doesn't make sense to me. But I mean, no, she has a point. Like the way that the first
hypothetical situation here I'm working with it.
the way that the first 10 minutes of Lord of the Rings are set up, I'm assuming is literally what they were like when they were like thinking about a story for Rings of Power. They're just like, let's play this, let's watch this.
Yeah,
and
I'm telling you,
going on from there.
I went and watched the first 10 minutes of Fellowship after I finished Rings of Power.
Nice.
And I was like, this is perfect. This is perfect because now you know exactly what they're talking about. Now you watched it, basically. Now you know what we're working towards.
And the thing is that you just have so much more context in a sense of like that world. Yeah. If you watch Lord of the Rings, that everything just makes more sense.
It's you have this commitment because you know who these characters are. You know who their offspring is not the right word, but
descendants, lineage.
Yeah, who their descendants are and how they're relevant and how it all connects. So yeah, the stakes are definitely. I don't know. It just feels like a weird word.
It's something about like the music. It's like
the music is epic in it.
That was something I was so like interested to see, like if they're gonna recapture that magic.
Yeah.
And who's it? Bear McCreary or whatever his name is. Sorry if I'm butchering your name.
Bear McFury?
Bear McCreary.
Oh, okay.
That guy's great, man. Like the music in this show is phenomenal, and there's just certain moments when the music's hitting, and you get like those like landscape shots.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my good! Like what is it? The last episode. There's shots throughout the whole show, but I vividly remember that last episode. I guess I can't say it, but
we really shouldn't.
These two people are riding on a horse, and you just see like the backdrop. It's like a shot straight out of Lord of the Rings, man. Like, you're getting to see more of the dwarves and like them at their prime.
Yeah,
it's just
getting to see these locations that we only like heard about but never got to see.
Absolutely.
Like Numenor, like.
It's like I'd rather watch them this way than not watch them at all.
Numenor? Yeah.
Incredible.
Oh my goodness.
Incredible. I got teary-eyed when I saw it the first time.
No, it's just so beautiful. There's just something about like there's like a golden age that you hear about in stories, but you're living in that. I guess it's like I'd say that's an idealized version of the prequels, like in Star Wars. Bring it
Yeah.
back to Star Wars, like you living in the rebellion time, in times of in the original trilogy, and it's like it's bleak, it's dark, not a lot of hope, and you go back, and then for the prequels, I guess what they're supposed to be this golden age of this establishment.
Yes.
Going back and seeing this stylized and romanticized version of what we've only heard about, and going back and everything's like has that gleam, that polish, that shiny factor, and it's like, and that to me is like how I input it into my Lord of the Rings, like world, or that realm or whatever,
Right.
where it's like it's shinier, it looks prettier, it looks nicer, because I feel like that's in a sense of the time, like that's how it was. And the thing I like about this show is it doesn't necessarily dwell on it. Like, yeah, it has to take some time to build up, but once you get to that one episode where everything just like makes sense, and everything just changes from there. And that's what I liked about it. Like after that point, it just, we're going from there, and you kind of feel like in the direction of where you're going from that point on. And it's hard like to not discuss it, to not actually talk about what I'm actually referring to.
But it's interesting too that we can sustain a conversation here without spoiling
spoiling.
really either of these shows, because you didn't even spoil the end of House of Dragon for me. House of the Dragon for me.
Are you Latino?
Yes, I am.
Someone has to give context at some point for that.
I don't know. Put it in the show
just
notes.
believe it.
Dan, are you there? Dan? So the fact that we can sustain that conversation without spoiling it, because it is fresh in our mind, and that's kind of what this conversation has been about. It's about the idea of fantasy rather than the details. Sure, we can pour over the scenes and the events that take place during these narratives, but really this world that fantasy transports us through these two series is something so unlike the world that we live in, yet so relevant. And especially in these days when we're like, when the world of man is torn asunder.
Yeah.
Right?
No, yeah. I think that man, I'm losing that train of thought.
Well,
Bring it back.
I'll tell you what I want to talk about. That ending was a linchpin. Like, because the events that round out that story in Rings of Power, I know them. I know what's supposed to happen, and the way that they approached it was fresh in the sense that I didn't see them telling that story this way, but it still makes sense, like in the context of the original text.
I mean, that fits in with what I was getting at. Obviously, so many times you get, obviously, when you have a big title, you're gonna get spin-offs. You're gonna get prequels. We have one right now with House of the Dragon,
right?
And so many different things. We have one right now with Rings of Power, but
we have 2 Star Wars shows at the same time, dropping in the same week.
There's just there's things about prequels where I feel like people that make these things have like a checklist where it's like, drop the references.
Yes.
Like blatant references in your face that it's just like, if at times it feels a little insulting, like it feels a little cheap, where it's like
pandering.
Yeah, you're pandering, and you're putting this. We obviously know why you're putting this, and I think Rings of Power doesn't really do that. Like it tells its story, but obviously it's well written in the sense where it's like, because these events actually happen, it's naturally like ingrained in the story, where it's like you don't have to call direct attention to it. Like lineages or things that are going to happen, danger, like impending doom, impending danger, stuff like that, where it's like the story just does its job. It tells a story in its own world, but it also doesn't disrespect what's going to come next. I think it adds to it, in fact. Yeah, that was my thought.
I think a really great decision that both of these shows did was place the time period so far in the distant past. I think, even though it's not as much in the Star Wars shows like Andor and Tales of the Jedi, they go so far back the period from what we normally follow that you can tell a fresh story without affecting too much. And that's what House of the Dragon and Rings of Power both do. We know what these events are going to lead to, but it's like hundreds of years away, 1,000 years away from the events. So you are very limited in how much of that pandering and Easter eggs and references. Like the show has to stand alone. Like in order to sustain the viewership, you actually have to make a good show. And sometimes I think that's what falls flat with fans of a particular genre, that fan service can override actual storytelling. And that's what draws us to these stories.
Yeah.
Characterization, a story that we can relate to and that we can believe in.
Yeah. There's also something about, and I guess it's good writing, or maybe it's probably casting part of it, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a decent show, it gives you the good characters that are easy to root for, but it
Yes.
also gives you those morally gray, or sometimes not gray, sometimes pretty morally black, and you find yourself also rooting for those characters somehow, because they're interesting, and because I think that's always interesting to kind of learn,
Right.
especially like the origins of, maybe not the villain origin story,
Mhm.
but just watching people
I
die.
think that is fair for Ring of Power, and I think like the jury's out on a show like House of the Dragon, like anti-hero or just the villain you like to root for because he's so delicious. You mentioned casting. Like Matt
Mhm.
Smith was amazing in Doctor Who, amazing in Morbius. I'm just kidding about the last one. But Matt Smith is a
The
great
best part about
actor.
that movie.
He's a great actor, so he drives that narrative forward. I was worried with Rings of Power, no known actors, which is sometimes
Yeah.
a blessing, but it can be a curse because I'm wondering, like, why couldn't they attract A-list? It's not like they had purely unknowns, although it's not like it was top tier at the time when they cast them, actors in the
No.
original films, right? But there's no one that you really know on these shows, and I was worried at first. How do you think the cast of Rings of Power did in bringing these characters that are so iconic, and that we already have a predisposed vision of A-list actors portraying? How do you think that cast did in bringing these characters to life?
You want to go?
I think they're great. I first want to say that I'm a big believer in, especially when there is an opportunity with a newer show where the source material is really known. If you have an opportunity to bring unknown actors into roles, I say go for it. I think it's harder a lot of the times when you bring a famous actor, even with Matt Smith, who did incredible in House of the Dragon. It took me personally like an episode or two for me not to see Matt Smith
Interesting.
as, Matt Smith playing Damon. He did a great job, and I think eventually I got over that. But I love when they put unknowns in a show, and then that actor then becomes your new favorite. Now you start looking for them in other projects because you say, wow, they did so well in this one thing, and now they're a beloved character. And I personally think they did a great job casting. I think it's a very diverse cast, which is also incredible. Like the first Latino elf ever. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I wonder if he says House of Dragon or House of the Dragon.
We got to look it up.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find that.
We'll see.
No, did you want to go?
No, I think you're.
I can do this all day.
Interrupting. No, I think that, I mean, that's the thing with, they did that with Game of Thrones. Like they had Sean Bean, who I'm like, that's Boromir. He's Boromir this entire show for me. That's, oh, never mind. All right, maybe he is Ned Stark.
Yeah.
Now he's Ned Stark.
Mm-hmm.
He's still Boromir, but now he's also Ned Stark.
Yeah, and I was expecting him to betray someone at some point in season
Like he
1,
always does.
and he didn't. And I was like, wow.
No, he
So it
didn't.
isn't really just
Growth.
him.
Growth.
Yeah, but then he
Character
dies
growth.
just like he always does.
That's
Yeah.
when he dies.
So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I guess he is.
It cost him his life. I think Game of Thrones did that. Casting a lot of unknowns in that show.
Mhm.
That, I mean, aside from Sean Bean, but I mean, now look at all of them. Look at the rest of the cast. A lot of them are they're full-fledged stars now.
Yeah.
Wait,
is that? Oh, Game of Thrones. Yeah.
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 And then House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon, I think, brought a bit more talent, like known talent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they're just great.
And it's true. It's not even that much because it's like, I'll say Matt Smith. Even Matt Smith, like genre fans will say we love him and this and that. But he's also not like super famous either.
Yeah.
But he's probably the most famous guy
Yeah.
on the show.
Like both of Rhaenyra's didn't. I don't even think they worked on much aside. I think the older Rhaenyra, the one that we're getting now, is I think she's like a Broadway actress, or she did a lot
She's
of
a stage
plays.
actor.
Stage actor.
Yeah.
Dude, actress, yeah.
Um,
A lot of. She's British.
she's Australian. I think.
She's Australian. Okay.
They're both Australian.
Oh, they both are really.
The younger one and the older one.
Interesting.
I knew Olivia Cook, Matt Smith, right, Rhys Ifans or
Oh, that's right.
Hightower.
Rhys Ifans isn't. He'll always
Patty
be
Considine.
the lizard. to
Patty
me.
Considine. Oh my goodness, I didn't even get to talk about him. Oh my goodness, King you haven't gotten there to the end, but
No,
bro,
I thought that guy would have died like 3 episodes. in.
everyone did.
Everyone did.
But Viserys, not to go back, but like he did
No,
such
go
a
ahead.
great job, and
He
I
gives
think
the
he should.
performance of his life in this.
He should win an Emmy. That guy is so
He
good in this
doesn't.
show. But yeah, back to Rings of Power. I think they did great. I think they did really good. Who did I know from Rings of Power?
I personally don't think I knew anyone.
I knew that the guy from Mandalorian was gonna be, the elf, Arondir. That's a cool
Mhm.
name.
Who's
They're so
who's he
cool
in the
names.
Mandalorian?
He's in Mandalorian season 1. He's one of the Twi'leks that tries to betray. He has a sister or something that betrays them. He tries to betray Mando, but Mando's like, "Ha, got
Okay,
you."
but it's a bit part.
Yeah,
right?
it's not a big thing.
Yeah.
No, there's someone in.
Whoever you are, we're happy that you're famous and successful. You're just
I'm trying to
escaping our mind right now. I personally.
Oh, that's who it was. Elrond. Elrond's in Game of Thrones.
Oh, he's in Game of Thrones.
He's young Ned Stark.
Who was it?
Really? Oh, but like in a flashback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's not a big
I
part
still
either.
remember his face.
Oh, you do remember his face?
Yeah.
I wouldn't remember. I wouldn't remember Peter from Paul. Elrond from whatever his character's name. Oh, Ned, I guess. Elrond from Ned.
How do you guys
Oh,
feel
yeah.
about his portrayal as Elrond?
I think he did great. I think he's a good actor, but the thing that was throwing me off was the hair. That's the main thing.
I'm gonna be honest with you.
It's 1,000-year difference, and yeah, sure, but
Listen, we talked about whether this show can be enjoyed as a fan of Lord of the Rings or not a fan. I kind of feel the same way about the actors in the sense that I'm not sure if I can fairly judge whether they're doing a good service to the character or not, because I think they're doing really good for the task that they have, which is, to me, is a very difficult task to accomplish. You are the same character from 1,000 years from now. So you have to both be that character and be completely different. So the Galadriel that we get on this show is nothing like Galadriel, but she still has to channel Galadriel.
I mean, both of them. I think like the same. I think they're the two sides of the coin. Like,
Yeah.
Galadriel, you see in certain instances where she's like uber powerful and she's cool, but she's very peaceful. She's very, she's like a rock for like a lot. Like when they meet her in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, sorry to cut you off,
Yeah.
but Galadriel's journey on this show puts into context her scenes in the Lord of the Rings,
So much more.
where I'm always
So
like,
much
that's
more.
yeah, where it's like, that's weird. That's Lord of the Rings. It doesn't really make sense. Like, I kind of understand what's going on here. According to this show, those scenes make so much more sense.
Galadriel's
Mhm.
in Galadriel's youth,
Yeah.
however long that is, it's like I can see how she goes from this like, be a warrior princess to like obviously with time changing perspective growing older to be more like, peaceful, soothing, and then just trying to like talk things out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can also see how Elrond is this hopeful, young, optimistic dude who, I mean, tries to have faith in man, but man, Isildur kind of screws him over, and he's kind of not as trusting,
Yeah.
which is the vibe that I get from Lord of the Rings. With how Elrond is, he's just not as trusting. He's pessimistic. He only like
Cautious.
actually smiles when he talks to like Gandalf or like people that aren't humans
Mm-hmm.
because he has no faith in them.
What's Isildur's father's name? Do you guys?
Elendil.
Okay, so my wife is the like Lord of the Rings buff, and she's like, "Oh, that's the name of the light that Galadriel gives
she
them."
gives the- yeah.
So
Gives
like
them
we're
the name.
constantly Yeah, we're constantly pausing the show, like fact checking, looking stuff up. We're like, I remember this. Let me look it up. That, and then I'll press play, and then they'll explain that exact same thing as soon as I'm done pausing. And like on one hand, it's very frustrating, but on the other hand, I really appreciate it there because if you're looking for the breadcrumbs, they're there. It doesn't spoon feed them to you, but it all makes sense if you're paying attention. And
Mhm.
that's something I appreciate and didn't expect.
And just like you said, going back far enough where it's like these are stories of old. These are things like I was reading I want to say Fellowship of the Ring when they're in the council, when they're in Elrond's council in Rivendell, and like Frodo freaks out about Elrond like being alive back then.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He's like, that story was like hundreds of years ago. Like, what are you
Mhm.
talking about? And he's like, yeah, well, I'm pretty old.
Yeah.
So it's just stuff like that, I think, is the fact that a show nowadays can like not bog you down with the details, but also give you enough where it's like, we know. And now they're trying to like, not force feed you, but they're giving you enough to go off of.
Yeah. I think I once made a comparison. Like in Last Jedi, Luke is the reluctant knight, right? Iron Man is a man in a suit of armor. He's Sir Gawain. He's King Arthur. You know, we're retelling these same stories all throughout time. And these fantasy shows that we're making now harken back to a period in our time that is almost like a fantasy in and of itself. We have records of what occurred during those times, but some of those time periods are so far back that we're limited to our understanding, and we're still understanding it more and more as time and history progresses. But also, some of it is kind of, in a dark part of our history where those narratives, they're biased, they're skewed, they're altered and changed. And I think that's what draws us, the mystery of it, not just the fantasy, but the mystery. And I think that's what these two shows are doing today. And I think it echoes like what draws us to this genre as a whole. And for those that haven't been drawn to it, there's an endless opportunity for stories to connect with that help teach us not just about themselves, but about ourselves and where we come from as well. While we wrap this conversation, any final thoughts on this subject? The two shows we've talked about, just a greater idea behind them.
Leigh first.
No, you can go first, so I can just sit and think on it.
There's just this line that, I mean, there's so many lines that I remember from Lord of the Rings, but there's this line that Aragorn, reluctant knight, that he says to in the Two Towers, that they're about to fight like against insurmountable odds, and there's a kid that's like he's like he's like a 15-year-old ready to fight a battle that he's probably not gonna win, so he's afraid. And so Aragorn has this moment with him where he goes to him and like he tests out his sword, and then he comforts him in a way.
Yeah.
And he gives him strength. He tells him that he's like brave, but then like the kid asks him, he's like, most people think we're not going to make through the night. Like they said, there's no hope. And then Aragorn just drops this line. I mean, it's so simple, but to me, like, it's always stayed with me. It's something that I relate to like almost everything in my life. How I've been saying it this whole conversation. It's like Aragorn just simply tells me, like, there's always hope. And that to me as a kid has been impactful. As an adult, it's been impactful.
Yeah.
It's one of the main things that drives my life and what I look for. Like I said, like, I don't want to be pessimistic about a lot of things. I don't want to say something's going to be bad. I try to find the hope. I try to have hope that things will turn out for the better, that things can be good. And that's one of the things that I guess fantasy in general has taught me. It's such a strong theme in Star Wars. And for me, it's the same thing in The Lord of the Rings, which is why I gravitate towards it so much. That theme that it's like, there is always hope. Even in the face of insurmountable odds, you can always, like, you have a choice to believe in something.
Yeah.
and that's what I try to do in every day. Like, yeah, real life is so different from like watching a movie. Real life is tough. Real life is hard. Things happen in life that are gonna get in your face. They're unexpected. They might not land for you. You might be going through a ridiculously tough time, but I think at the end of the day, you still have the choice to hope to that you can be better and that the situation can get better.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's something that's just so, like I said, like I harp on it every time, impactful and powerful in my life. That why spend my time watching this stuff? Why spend my time reading about this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
It's something that it's like at the root of the conversation, like why we do all this is to find what is so important to us. For me, I mean, for a lot of people, I think it's that just driving factor. It's hope, to look forward to look forward to something, and to believe that it's gonna work out in the end.
Leigh?
No further thoughts.
Okay, that
I
was
think you
beautiful,
nailed
right?
it. I thought that was beautiful.
I guess I'll just leave our listeners and our viewers with a quote from Rings of Power, which I sent to you guys, right, with the screen cap
Mm-hmm.
towards the end of season 1. Elrond says, "Hope is never mere, not even when it is meager." Even in the face of hopelessness, there's always something to gravitate to. And we hope that you keep on hoping and keep on searching with us week to week. Till next time, search on.